Hello friends, and welcome to a very little tutorial. Today I'm going to give you a tutorial on the Afterthought heel. So this Afterthought heel is actually included in one of my newest designs, which are called the Socksy Socks. You can get the pattern on my website, or you can also get it on Ravelry. So these are the Socksy Socks, and this Afterthought heel is created by adding a piece of scrap yarn between two of the colors, and this is where we are going to pick up stitches, but I'm going to show you how to get there first. When you're using an Afterthought heel, you measure the length of the foot from where your ankle bone is to where the top of the spot around your pinky, where your pinky toe begins, where your toe kind of curves. So that's the amount of space that will be just like knit straight on a pair of socks like that. So when you're doing a measurement, it's 2.5 inches short this way, and it's 2.5 inches short from the toe. So that is, the heel is approximately 2.5 inches deep, and it is a very simple heel to do. This is one of my Socksy Socks that is ready for a heel to be put in, but I'm going to show you how to do this part. I'll show you how to do the Afterthought heel when you're using a self-striping yarn, because with a self-striping yarn, it's important to split the colors that you're doing. So on this row here, I am going to be going in pattern, and then the first row before I put in the scrap yarn, I'm going to just knit that straight, because then it makes it easier for picking up the stitches that we will be picking up after. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my yarn, and I already know that this is going to be the last row of color on the one side, so I'll just knit this row in pattern on this side of the stitches first. Now that I have that row done, I'm going to just knit straight across, and this will be the first row before my scrap yarn goes in. So I'm just going to knit straight across. Okay, perfect. So that is just knit straight across. Now we go back into the next row. We're going to knit across here, again in pattern, because this is going to be the top of the foot, and where we put in the heel is going to be the bottom of the foot. So we'll just follow along in pattern here. So the Afterthought heel is really good if you don't know the length of somebody's foot and you want to knit some socks for them. You can do a true Afterthought heel, which means you wouldn't be putting scrap yarn in. You would just continue knitting and then you would pick out the stitches, which I will show you how to do with the secondary color. So now I'm back to the heel side, the underfoot side, and I'm going to add in my scrap yarn here, and this is what will create the space for the heel. Here is my scrap yarn. Just take that side out and get ready to knit straight across. You want to use a fingering weight yarn or whatever size yarn you're using, or smaller. That makes it easier to pull the stitches out when you're done. So just go along and knit those stitches, just straight knit across half of your stitches. So depending on how large of a sock you're knitting, you're going to be knitting a different amount. This is a 64 stitch sock, so I'm knitting across 32 stitches, which is exactly half. And I always leave quite a bit of a tail on either side, just so that it doesn't accidentally start pulling out while I'm finishing knitting my sock. Okay, so that's the last stitch. Then I just break that yarn off or snip it off or whatever makes you happy. Then the stitches that we just put on there, we are going to move them back over to the left needle. So slide them one by one back over. You're not doing anything fancy except moving them from one needle to the other. Oh, don't drop that one. Okay, so all those stitches are moved back over. There's 32 stitches there. Then you grab your working yarn and you knit straight across those stitches. Now on the side with the scrap yarn, that is the side you're always going to remain just knitting, so that the bottom of the foot is flat and you don't have to worry about having any ridges or bumps on that side. Then you continue knitting on in pattern on the top of the foot. And I'll just finish off this sock here and come back and show you how to pick up the stitches on the Afterthought heel. So now it's time to pick up the stitches for the Afterthought heel. So this is the toe, and the Afterthought heel looks very similar to the toe because we're going to be using the same kind of stitches. So flip it over. And the yarn I used was dark. I wasn't planning on doing this when I started, but with this yarn, but now I'm going to. So when you look at the scrap yarn that's in here, it creates V's. So what we are going to do is where you see that V, the stitch before that, the line before that, you're going to pick up in the row before the right leg of that V, and then the one, so you're going to pick up the right leg all along, and you're going to pick up the right leg in the V underneath of the picked up yarn. So it's one stitch additional. So on this sock I did 32 stitches across, so when I'm done on this row I will have 34 stitches that I've picked up. So I'll just go ahead and pick those up one at a time, picking up that right leg right across. And you want to make sure that you're not getting the stitches below. You're just gently picking up each of those right legs of those V's. This part is fairly quick, especially if you can see your stitches easily. It comes along really quickly. Slide those stitches down and just keep your working yarn at the tip so that it's easier to pull those stitches, that needle through. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is the last stitch in the scrap yarn, so then I'm going to pick up into the next stitch below that. So it should have 34 stitches on the needle. So let's count that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. So that's perfect. You'll notice I picked up a little bit of the blue scrap yarn, which is fine because I'll just pull that out when I get there. But you want to make sure that it's no more. If you end up picking up a little bit, it's fine. But if you pick up like a whole stitch, it's going to be a bigger pain to pull out. So now we're going to do the magic loop. So we pull this needle all the way across. And I'm not going to pull it all the way through yet. And then turn the sock the other direction. And again, you're going to look at the V's here. So you'll see there's a V there. What we're going to do is we're going to pick up the stitch before the first V and then pick up the right leg of each V, continuing down. And again, we should have 34 stitches. Okay, and now at the other end, there's the last stitch, so I will be picking up the next stitch on the next row. So counting those stitches, there should be 34. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. So 34 on each needle, which is perfect. I'm going to slide this needle out and I'll show you why. So when I added this yarn in, I left ends, but I didn't tie anything off or attach it. So what you need to do is just slip that needle into the end stitch and give it a pull. And that will release your scrap yarn, and you're going to just pick the scrap yarn out of the entire heel. I would recommend doing it right away instead of waiting till after your heel is in, because if there's any issues, you want to make sure you catch them early in the process. You can see because of where I put that scrap yarn, it perfectly splits the colors for the self-striping yarn. That's exactly what you want to do. And when I do the adding in of the next color, I pick a color that isn't either one of these colors in the stripe repeat. Let's fix that one. So I'll pick one of the shades of blue. So the heel really pops. This is a really easy way to do a heel. If you're not sure of the person's foot measurement, you can do a true afterthought heel, which means you don't even put a scrap of yarn in, you just keep knitting and then measure out where you need to put the heel and you add it in later, but it's the same process. You would just clip your yarn in the middle of your heel and then you'd pick out each direction and then you'd use those ends and weave them in if you were doing a true afterthought heel. And at this point it starts getting a little more difficult because there's more yarn to pull out. Depending on how deep the heel is too. Okay, so this is the section where I had that piece that was attached wrong. So I just break that and then you can just continue pulling it through. One little spot. Just making all of your stitches live on your needles. And with the scrap yarn, if it's getting too cumbersome to pull it through, you can actually shorten it and then just keep shortening it as you go, which makes it easier to pull out. This one will pull out from the other side. All right, so that heel is now completely live and open. And depending on how deep your heel is how many rounds that you'll want to do before you start decreasing. I do 6 rounds before I start decreasing because I find that's a really good heel shape, which I really, really like. So, okay, so this yarn ball is at the blue, which was the last color I used at the tip. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to wind off this light blue and the dark purple and the light pink. I'm just going to wind those colors off, and I'm going to start with the dark blue for the heel, and I'll do both heels with the dark blue. There's a little bit of color management that goes on when you're doing self-striping socks if you want them to be completely matching. And I'll show you part of how to make that happen so that the heel comes out identical on both heels. So the color before the blue is pink. So you can see where the color changes there. So what you're going to want to do is break off the yarn or cut it with a larger section of the pink there, because you're going to start your stitches where the blue begins with enough fold over so that it's consistently blue. Okay, so I'll pick this up. I'm going to slide the first needle in farther so it's getting ready to be knit. Put your needle in your first stitch. Get your yarn ready. Loop it over so the color's the true color, and then pull that stitch through. Then working with your blue color, you're going to knit along the heel. So with an Afterthought heel, that was the hardest part, is the adding in the yarn for the Afterthought heel and then picking up the stitches and taking out the scrap yarn. Okay, let's see here, there's a little bit of a thing happening. There. Just some of that scrap yarn. Twist it around 2 of the stitches. And continuing on with the magic loop, I'm going to slide this yarn down. This needle over. And then knit across. And counting 6 rows when you do it this way is really simple because you just count your V's up from where the color changes, which makes that so much easier. Okay, so that's my first row. I'm just going to continue and knit my 6 rows and I'll be right back. So once you have your 6 rows done, so you're going to count the V's up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 6th is actually on the needle. Make sure you have 6 on both sides. A good tip is that where you started your yarn, that is the beginning of your row. So if you want to put a stitch marker there or whatever, you can, or just remember that that's the beginning of your row because it might not line up with what the beginning of your row was from the very beginning if you start on either side. It doesn't matter which side you start on, just make sure you have the same amount of stitches and that you are doing the same amount of rows on each side. So the first part of the decrease after you've gotten your 6 rows done is you knit the first stitch. I just give that a little tighten up. Then you're going to slip, slip, and then knit the next stitch. And then you knit straight across to the last 3 stitches. So the last 3 stitches on the needles, 1, 2, 3, and then you knit the first 2 together, just like that, and then knit 1. Then you flip your work over, slide your needle through to do the magic loop again, slide this one out, get enough loop to make working easy. Then you knit the first stitch, and then slip, slip, and knit the second one together, second and third stitch together, and then knit straight across to the last 3 stitches again. So we're at the last 3, 1, 2, 3, and then knit 2 together, and then knit 1, flip your work. Now on this row, this is going to be your rest row. So there's a decrease row, a rest row, a decrease row, a rest row. And on the rest row, you just straight knit it. This will give you a nice angle for your decreases, and essentially you are doing a toe on your heel. So you're going to continue on doing a decrease row and a rest row exactly how I just showed you until you have 12 stitches left on each needle. So there'll be 24 stitches left total, and you will end after you have done your final rest row. So you'll have decreased to the 12 stitches on each needle, 24 stitches total. Then you will do your full knit 1 round, and then you'll get ready to do the Kitchener stitch.